Uh, I'm going to call the meeting of the Indiana Environmental Rules Board to order June 8th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. Government Center, Room A. First thing, order of business is I'm going to call the roll. Dr. Alexandrovich? Here. Mr. Bortner?
Here.
Mr. Chambers?
Here.
And, you know, if you're here, be sure and unmute when you want to talk. Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mr. Essler's not here yet. Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Horn? Don't think he's going to be here. I wish I could say this name right. Ms. Koreski?
It's Kozerski, and yes, ma'am, I am here.
Kozerski? I'm sorry, I butcher your name every time. Ms. Nelson?
Here.
Dr. Nemec?
Here.
Mr. Rulon?
Here.
Mr. Schuler?
Here.
Ms. Stover?
Here.
Mr. Waskey?
Here.
And the chair is present. 11:12, so we definitely have a quorum. I'm going to ask Kevin Bump to cover the logistics and explain how that will work.
Actually, Chairman Guard, we're gonna have Sarah Bonick of Meeting Communications take care of that portion today.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Hi, my name is Sarah Bonnick. I'm Director of External Relations with IDEM. For those of us joining on Zoom, all microphones are currently muted. We will be taking questions and comments from the public at today's meeting. At the appropriate time, all participants will be able to unmute themselves and ask questions or make comments. If you have a question or technical issue during the presentation, please use the raise hand or chat feature. To access the raise hand and chat feature, at the bottom or top of your screen, depending on your device, you'll see a menu bar. You may have to move your mouse or touch the screen for the menu bar to pop up. In the middle of that menu, there is a chat icon which you can click on to show the chat dialog. You should also see the raise hand option. Please utilize the raise hand or chat features if you have any questions or comments, and you'll be called upon at the appropriate time. For those of you joining us by phone, if you have questions or comments, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and we will call on you at the appropriate time. When called upon, you need to unmute your phone by pressing *6. For everyone in today's meeting, please identify yourself when speaking. If any members of the media have joined us, please utilize the chat feature or email media@idem.in.gov. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on IDEM's website in the next day or two. And I will turn it back over to Chairwoman Guard. Thank you.
Are there any questions about this from anybody that's either on Zoom or in present? Okay, the first order of business today is the approval of the summary of the February the 9th, 2022 board meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented? If not, is there a motion to approve?
This is Ted Nemec. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second. Joanne Alexander.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The minutes from February the 9th, 2022 are approved. Commissioner, you have a new staff member to introduce, I think.
I have a couple. Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. It's actually supposed to be in Green Bay today at the Great Lakes Conference, and I fell victim to travel issues like many have around the country. And my wife and I are down to one car this week, so she is using my car and I am at home working. So Providing Stover, she's my chief of staff. She started in January, is filling in for me today. And she'll be given the majority of my report. Couple things I did want to cover quickly, just from a agency level. A couple of things we're dealing with, and most everyone's dealing with. One of which is staffing. You know, when the Daniels administration came in, they wanted to get IDEM down to 902 employees. We were well above 1,000 at that point, and today we're down to just under 750.
Oh,
So we have had a drastic reduction in staffing, and it's for a litany of reasons. You know, the families, kind of like mine, went down to one income, or a lot of folks retired, or folks found, you know, the job market right now for employees is very strong, not as strong for employers. So we, like most other employers, are dealing with this, and we're working hard to get people in the door and trying to keep them. It so far it hasn't really affected our metrics, but there's only so long we can continue working at the staffing levels we have before that will start affecting our permitting and compliance metrics. To date, we're staying pretty strong where, you know, our permit metric is how many days can we get a permit done before the permit time frame. Our goal is 75% of that time. So if a permit is 100 days, we want to get it done in 75. Last month, we were getting it done in 54 days. So we're doing really well in the permitting metric. And then on compliance metric, the goal is 7 days, and we are hovering right around 3.5 to almost 4. So we're doing pretty well there as well. The one other thing quickly that I wanted to highlight, and then I'm going to turn it over to Par, is House Enrolled Act 1226 passed this session. It's a bill on solid waste. Had 4 parts to it. It was almost, could have been 4 different bills that was put together into one bill. The first part dealt with legitimate use, and whether or not somebody needed a permit to legitimately reuse something. In an effort to try and get some consensus on this topic, I created a group chaired by Bruce Palin and Cal Davidson, and we met pretty frequently to talk about issues with solid waste and reusing it, and ways that we can make that better, and things we need to be careful about so that we don't end up having a lot of open dumps in the state. The bill somewhat did a lot of what we were looking at to do anyway. So right now, if you are putting what would be considered solid waste in a process, it is no longer regulated. So, and Cal would have way more examples than I do, but you know, one that comes to mind is that, you know, where shingles were being used for cement and roads. That's not a thing that's being used as much anymore, but it was. So in that event, Cal would not have had to go get a legitimate use approval. He could just do it because he's putting it in a process to make another product or use it in another way. So anything like that would no longer be regulated. The second part it has to do with hazardous waste facilities. Some of them are starting to get involved in solid waste handling as well, and they did not want to have to get 2 permits. And so we worked with those groups to make sure that the language was something we would be comfortable with, so that the hazardous waste and solid waste were not commingled. That was the big deal. They go different places, and if they're commingled, it's all considered hazardous waste. So we just want to make sure that was clear. Then the third part was adopting our the statute adopts the 2018 solid waste rules for the purposes of hazardous waste. It's a federal rule. And they stay adopted until the board can adopt them. And it has to do, there's a lot in there, but a big piece of this, the big push of it was secondary hazardous materials. The way the rules and the laws are written prior to this law change, people felt was too rigorous compared to what EPA allows. And then finally, there was a recycling piece to the bill. It's trying to get Indianapolis to put their foot in the door for recycling in some big project. We offered up $4 million for that from the Recycling Market Development Board fund. That fund has a decent chunk of change in it, and we don't use it every year, so it seemed like the logical place to get money for this project, and we'll see what that looks like. And with that, if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer. If not, I will pass it over to Pravani.
Commissioner, I do have a question. What about things like, if there are still such things, but asphalt shingles and things like that for reuse? Is that tracked at all?
Well, now with the passage of the bill, if you're putting it in a process, you don't even have to notify the agency of what you're doing. We won't find out if something is really being reused until we get a complaint, and then we will go and investigate. And if it is being reused, and we can after talking with the company that we can find that it's being reused, then that complaint's closed. If they're stockpiling and it's clear they're not reusing or putting anything through a process, then we'll go through the solid waste rules that dictate that would be an open dump. So, and that goes with any kind of products, really.
It really makes a lot of hoops for you all to have to jump through.
Yeah, but it was, the bill was in a different spot before that was even more difficult prior to its passage. So it did come around a little bit towards the end, towards something that we could be neutral on. And you know, I developed this group that I mentioned because I had heard of a lot of complaints from people asking, why do they have to get this big solid waste processing permit when all they're doing is taking a single use stream, whether it's metal, wood, whatever, and reusing it, and there'd be good reasons to reuse it. And I agreed with that. And so my purpose of putting together the group was to figure out ways that we could have lesser regulations around people that were reusing single streams, so they wouldn't have to get this big permit that costs a lot of money, actually. So the bill went a little bit further than I may have wanted to go, but that's the way legislation works sometimes. So we're wrapping our arms around it, and we're gonna start meeting again with that group so that we can start discussing what the legitimate use rule will look like, because there are some products that don't go into a process. Foundry sand's a good example of that. They, once it's there, people want to legitimately use that for making berms or filling different things, and the organizations that do that want rules around legitimate use to understand what is expected, what's not expected.
Okay, and one more question, different subject on your low number of employees. Are you seeing a lot of overtime?
No, we have a couple programs that have utilized comp time for projects, and they're project specific. So our underground storage tank IT project, we had some people receiving comp time just to get all that work done. overtime, and I guess you can lump those two together, comp time and overtime. The difference is overtime is pay, comp time is time you can use as like vacation or sick time. Overtime has to be very specific and approved by the budget agency. So many agencies don't utilize overtime except for like state police, because I mean, they do run over quite a bit. The one group we do allow overtime if it's necessary is environmental response, or our group.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions of the commissioner before? Okay,
Thank you all.
Right, I think I'm next. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank everybody for being here, both those in person and those of us joining virtually. Like Brian said, I've been chief of staff here at IDEM since January, so almost 5 months now, and I've been having a great time, meeting a lot of fantastic people and learning a lot. So nothing but wonderful things to say. I will say, though, the job has gotten a lot easier since session has ended. It was a little bit time consuming, as I know most of you know. So happy to be, in the cooling off period after that. And again, like Brian mentioned, a lot of my time these past couple of months has been spent interviewing and hiring for new positions, particularly in our senior team. We've had a lot of turnover in some of our more senior level positions. So Brian and I had to set aside entire days to interview candidates to make sure we're finding the right people for our agency. One of those folks is here today, Drake Abramson. He's our new legislative director, who's a former Senate LA. He worked for Senator Dorio and Senator Alting and an intern for Senator Messmer. Do I have that right? He's been here about 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe. He's been doing a really great job for us. We're excited to have him on board. We also recently promoted Bob Luger to the role of Assistant Commissioner over the Office of Program Support. And most of you know Julia Wickard. Julia left a couple months ago to go back to her previous role at the USDA Farm Services Agency. We also hired a new CFO, Hillary Alderette, who came to us from Department of Corrections and has extensive state finance experience. And we are also in the process of finalizing our pick for a new communications director, which hopefully we will be able to announce very, very soon, and we're very excited about. So we've had a ton of staffing changes, but I am truly excited to see some of the new talent coming into the agency and promoting into higher level roles. And I'm really hoping nobody else leaves, because I'm tired of interviewing, and hopefully Brian and I can get a little bit of a break from that. So exciting changes happening and to be happening in the future. And one other thing that has been occupying a lot of my time recently is PFAS, which you guys might know is forever chemicals, because of how tiny the molecules are and how long they stay in your body and in the environment. So last year, IDEM was notified of a detection of PFAS in the Treaty Creek area. So that's just south of Wabash. So we began a sampling project in that area to determine how widespread the issue was and whether any drinking water was impacted. So we initially sampled 3 public water systems in the area. One was a residential facility, one was an elementary school, and one was a middle or high school, I don't remember exactly, to see whether those systems were impacted. Luckily, we found no detections there. From that, we moved on to sampling the surface water in Treaty Creek, which unfortunately did show elevated levels, so it confirmed the information that was originally given to us. Once we got those results, we wanted to see whether private wells in the area were impacted. So if you know the area at all, it's a pretty rural area where folks aren't hooked up to city water, and most use private wells for their drinking water. So we wanted to see, whether any of the water from Treaty Creek had seeped into the wells. We ended up sampling about 50 or 60 drinking water wells located within about 300 feet of Treaty Creek, because our water and land folks told us that those were the wells most likely to be impacted by the surface water in the creek. And when we were doing the sampling, we didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know how many of those 50 or 60 wells might come back with detections and at what level, teeny tiny amounts or massive amounts. We didn't know. So we got all the lab results back from the drinking water wells, and we were fortunate that only 5 of those wells had PFAS detections, which was honestly better than I was expecting. And only 3 of those wells had detections that exceeded the US EPA lifetime advisory level of 70 parts per trillion. So for those 3 wells, we've installed water filtration systems, kind of a carbon filter. So not like a small Brita filter like you might attach to your faucet or put in your fridge, but larger systems, kind of like a water softener that'll pull out the PFAS and allow that to be safe for drinking water. And we've done that free of charge to the homeowner. And we're still doing additional sampling in the area of plots of farmland, soil samples and water samples both to try and figure out the source of the contamination. Right now, our land and water experts are working in the area, so hopefully soon we'll have a better idea of where it's coming from and whether any drinking water is impacted. But as of now, the whole situation has gone kind of better than I expected, and we'll be sure to keep you guys updated as we know more. But certainly an issue that I know a lot of different agencies are dealing with. We coordinated our response with agriculture, DHS, Board of Animal Health, Department of Health, all impacted agencies, and I think we're learning a lot. So we'll be sure to keep this group updated.
Are there any questions? Well, thank you so much. Sounds like you've hit the ground running.
Sure trying to.
Okay, the next order of business is Chris Peterson for a rulemaking report.
Good afternoon, I'm Chris Peterson in the Rules Development Section of the Office of Legal Counsel. Our next board meeting is tentatively set for September 14th. And at that meeting, we have a few rules that we can anticipate bringing before you. The first two are the final adoption of the landfill emissions rule that's before you today, and the Angola chloride variance revisions rule that's before you today. In addition to that, we have an emergency rule that we're preparing for Lake and Porter ozone redesignations. That is one that we're trying to get the regular rulemaking done quickly too, and if we can get that published soon enough, we may also have the regular rulemaking before you as a Section 8 rulemaking for adoption. So those are the rules that we're relatively sure of. There are a few others that we're not unsure of, so they'll be added to the agenda if they're ready. And I'll be happy to answer the questions.
Are there any questions for Chris? Okay, thank you, Chris. Today we have hearings for the following board actions: adoption of Davies and Pike County SO2 redesignations, state SO2 and Porter County designations, preliminarily adoption of landfill emissions, Angola chloride variance revisions. We will also have a non-rule policy document on the risk-based closure guide and an update on the citizens petition to request rulemaking on the 2012 EPA recreational water quality criteria. As a reminder, if you wish to testify in any of today's hearings, please fill out the comment card and give it to Carly Kendrick at the sign table. The rules being considered at today's meeting were included in board packets and are available for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel, 13th floor, Indiana Government Center North. The entire board packet is also available on IDEM's website at least 1 week prior to each board meeting. A written transcript of today's meeting will be made. The transcript and any written submissions will be open for public inspection at the Office of Legal Counsel. A copy of the transcript will be posted on the rules page of the agency website when it becomes available. Will the official reporter of the cause please stand, raise your right hand and state your name?
Libby Meyer.
Do you solemnly affirm that you will keep complete and true notes of all that transpires and prepare a transcript thereof and faithfully perform all duties imposed upon you as an official reporter of the state of Indiana?
Yes.
Thank you. Now we'll have a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the state of Indiana concerning adoption of amendments to rules at 326 IAC 1-4-15 and 326 IAC 1-4-64 regarding the redesignation of a portion of the Davies and Pike counties for the sulfur dioxide standard. I will now introduce Exhibit A, the draft rule, into the record of the hearing. Kayleen Walsh will present the rule.
Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Keelan Walsh with the Rules Development Section of the Office of Legal Counsel. And I'm here to present rule number 21-258, sulfur dioxide redesignation for Davies and Pike counties in Indiana for your consideration. This rule amends 326 IAC 1-4-15 and 326 IAC 1-4-64 to update the attendant designation status for Beal Township in Davies County and Washington Township in Pike County under the 2010 1-hour primary National Indian Air Quality Standards for sulfur dioxide. This rule also amends 326 IAC 1-4-15 and 326 IAC 1-4-64 to update the definition status for the remaining portions of Davies and Pike counties to unclassifiable or attainment under the 2010 1-hour primary SO2 max as published by US EPA in the Federal Register on January 19, 2018. And to clarify that these counties are designated as Federally National Secondary Standard for the 1971 3-hour SO2 standard published in the Federal Register on March 3rd, 1978. This rule was adopted by the board on November 10th, 2021, but was recalled on March 30th, 2022 due to an administrative error identified in the promulgation package by each regional office. The Section 8 notice as published in the Indiana Register was unintentionally omitted from the November 10th, 2021 board packet. And the Section 8 notice contains the findings of the commissioner, which are required to be presented to the board before final adoption. Therefore, this will be presented again for final adoption with the Section 8 notice included in your board packet. I don't respectfully request that the board final adopt this rule as presented, and I'm available to answer any more questions you can have. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Kaylin? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any speaker cards that have been turned in?
No, ma'am.
Any online? Don't think so. Okay, this hearing is concluded. The board will now consider adoption of amendments to 326 IAC 1-4-15 and 326 IAC 1-4-64 Davies and Pike Counties SO2 redesignation. Board discussion. Is there a motion to adopt the rules as presented? Is
Ken Ruland, so moved.
there a second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote. Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Chambers,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
is Mr. Etzler on yet? Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Koreski,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Woski,
Yes.
the chair votes aye. The vote is 12-0. Okay, now, this is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the state of Indiana concerning adoption of amendments to rules at 326 IAC 1-4 regarding sulfur dioxide designations for most of the state and 326 IAC 1-4-65 regarding the designation for Porter County for ozone. I will now introduce Exhibit B, the draft rule, into the record of the hearing. Kaylin Walsh will present the rule.
Hello again, I'm Keelan Walsh, and I'm here to present rule number 21-515, state sulfur dioxide and Porter County ozone designations for your consideration. This rulemaking updates the attainment designation status for 90 of Indiana's 92 counties for sulfur dioxide to accurately reflect the federal language used in the Code of Federal Regulation at 40 CFR 81.315. This rulemaking also updates the designation status of Porter County under the 2015 8-hour ozone national ambient air quality standard based on the final rule published by the US EPA in the Federal Register on June 14, 2021. In order to avoid conflict with ongoing litigation concerning a challenge to the designation status for several townships in Huntington County, the rule language differs from what is currently reflected in 40 CFR 81.315 and will be updated if necessary once the challenge is resolved. This rule was adopted by the board on February 9th, 2022, but was recalled on March 20th, 2022 due to administrative error identified in the promulgation package by the Attorney General's office. And the Section 8 notice as published in the Indiana Register was unintentionally amended from the February 9th, 2022 board packet. The Section 8 notice contained the findings of the commissioner, which are required to be presented to the board for final adoption. And so this will be presented again for final adoption with the Section 8 notice included in the board packet. I respectfully request that the board final adopt this rule as presented, and I'm available to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions for Kaylin?
Yes, I have one.
Okay, go ahead. State your name so I'll know who it is.
It's Joanne Alexandrovich.
Okay.
Kaylin, I was just wondering if you could tell me what's so special or different about Dearborn, Gibson, Jefferson, Porter, and Worth, and that they cannot be classified for the 71 secondary 3-hour and some 2 standard. I know it's in the Federal Register, but I'm wondering why those 5 counties. I'm on this one.
I don't have the rule directly in front of me. Is Matt stuck in on? Matt, are you on Zoom call?
Yep, I'm on. This is Matt.
Would you be able to address that perchance?
So I don't have the rule in front of me. I could pull it up real quick, but I assume the question is why they're considered unclassifiable. Is that what you're asking?
Right, well, it's just 5 counties and it's for this 71 secondary 3-hour. So I'm just wondering why that is.
So the designations that EPA establishes are either attainment, non-attainment, or unclassifiable. Unclassifiable in very general terms means we don't have sufficient data because we don't have sufficient monitoring data or to support a designation of non-attainment. And those are areas where just historically we've not had that information, but there's no reason, but based on the modeling information, they would not be non-attainment. So it's just better, short of going into too much detail, it's basically the way in which the EPA establishes those classifications. So those old classifications we're trying to clean up in this particular rule have long since been essentially replaced by the newer SO2 standards that have been put in place.
Okay, but it just seems a little bit strange because a lot of those are ones with power plants that monitor the SO2, so that's why I don't quite understand why they're different than the others, but that's okay.
Yeah. I didn't know, Susan, we supposed to have someone from the programs branch there today for the rules. I didn't know if she could elaborate if she's there.
Yeah. Susan,
Susan, why don't you come up front if you don't mind? Thank you.
Susan, I think the only thing I could probably add to the discussion is I think you mentioned Warwick County, Dearborn County. Those all sound like counties that were they were originally non-attainment counties at one point in time, a long time ago with a 3-hour standard. It's so I know you mentioned monitoring data. Your Republic had monitoring data at one point in time. And I'm not quite sure if I have
All the other counties are better than the national standard. And this cannot be classified. So
Yeah, I just, this sound like original non-attainment counties, so somehow the classification is different, but if we have mentioned, they are, in attainment, and it's just different.
And likely better than the state.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Kaylin. Are there any speaker cards?
Ma'am.
Okay, this hearing is concluded. The board will now consider adoption of amendments to 326 IEC 1-4 state SO2 and Porter County ozone designation. Is there any board discussion? Is there a motion to adopt the rules as presented?
Meeting Nelson, so moved.
Is there a second?
Al Davidson, second.
This is roll call. Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Chambers,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Kurowski,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Waski, Mr. Waski,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
the chair votes aye. Again, the vote is 12 ayes, 0 nays. So the rule is passed. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning preliminary adoption of amendments to rules at 326 IEC 8-8.2 landfill emissions. I will now introduce Exhibit C, the draft rule, into the record of the hearing. Keelan Walsh will present the rule.
Hello again, I'm Keelan Walsh, and I'm here to present rule number 22-109, municipal solid waste landfill emissions update for your consideration. Municipal solid waste landfills are discrete areas of land or excavation that receive household waste or other types of non-hazardous waste, such as commercial solid waste, non-hazardous sludge, and industrial non-hazardous solid waste. On May 21st, 2021, US EPA published a final rule in the Federal Register at 40 CFR 62 subpart 000 that requires states to submit plans implementing the 2016 municipal solid waste landfill emission guidelines. Indiana is currently operating under state rules that implemented the federal new source performance standards at 40 CFR 60 subpart 000 and emission guidelines for municipal solid waste landfills at 40 CFR 60 subpart CC that US EPA promulgated on March 16, 1996. While US EPA's intention is for the 2021 federal plan to replace the existing 2016 approved state plan, the federal rules for the 2016 emission guidelines did not repeal 40 CFR 60 subpart 000 that Indiana's state rules rely on. Consequently, the municipal solid waste landfills in Indiana are now subject to both the federal plan at 40 CFR 62 subpart 000, as well as the 1996 emission guidelines and state rules, which creates conflicting requirements for Indiana sources. Item intends to address this conflict with a non-rule policy document in the interim until this rulemaking is final and effective, which is likely to be presented to you at the next board meeting. This rulemaking will repeal 326 IAC 8-8 and 326 IAC 8-8.1 and add a new rule at 326 IAC 8-8.2 to incorporate 40 CFR 62 subpart 000 for municipal solid waste landfills into state rules, which will remove the conflicting requirements. The incorporation by reference also includes the updated federal language published on February 14, 2022 in the Federal Register, which updates several sections of 40 CFR 62 to clarify compliance schedules, the closed subcategory, and the definition of administrator.
Once this rule is final, IDEM will submit a state plan to US EPA for approval. Once approved by US EPA, the federal plan will no longer be in effect in Indiana, which will remove the conflicting federal and state requirements. It should also be noted that while 326 IAC 8-8.1 was put in place solely to address the requirements for a state plan under 40 CFR 60 subpart 2C, the additional rule at 326 IAC 8-8 for landfills located in Lake, Porter, Clark, and Floyd counties was implemented to address volatile organic compound emission reductions for ozone non-attendant counties. The emission standards in the new rule at 326 IAC 8-8.2 will be applicable statewide and will be sufficient for Indiana to continue meeting ozone planning requirements. Indiana also intends to request a state implementation plan revision to replace 326 IAC 8-8 with the new rule at 326 IAC 8-8.2 once this rulemaking is final. I respectfully request that the board preliminarily adopt this rule as presented, and program staff and I are available to answer any further questions you may have. Thank you.
Other questions from anyone?
Alexander Rich has more questions. I assume the 2016 guidelines are a little more stringent than the 1996 guidelines.
I believe they are a little bit, more stringent and more inclusive than
So
the original.
is it gonna, the landfills are already trying to meet those emission guidelines. Are they having any difficulties in meeting those guidelines?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't know if anyone else would have any further information on that, but I believe these are regulations that they're already familiar with and working to meet or have already met.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Are there any speaker cards?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. This hearing is concluded. The board will now consider preliminary adoption of amendments to rules at 326 IAC 8-8.2 landfill emissions. Is there any board discussion? Is there a motion to adopt the rules as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second? Is there a second? This is roll call vote. Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Chambers,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Kurowski,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Mr. Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Woski.
Yes.
The chair votes aye. Again, the vote is 12 ayes, 0 nays. The motion is passed. This is a public hearing before the Environmental Rules Board of the State of Indiana concerning preliminary adoption of amendments to rules at 327 IAC 2-1.5-7 regarding Angola chloride variance revisions. I will now introduce Exhibit D, the draft rule, into the record of the hearing. Crystal Hackney will present the rule.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Crystal Hackney, and I'm a rule writer in the Rules Development section within the Office of Legal Counsel. This rulemaking updates the City of Angola's chloride variance limits for the monthly average and daily maximum limits as required as part of the water quality standard variance process under 327 IAC 534.1M. It reflects the variance limits for chloride that were approved in 2021. A variance request can be submitted to IDEM when an application is submitted for a new or modified NPDES permit.
The City of Angola's modified permit became effective on November 1st, 2021. It reflects the final approval of the variance for the water quality standard for fluoride. Item requests that the board preliminarily adopt the rule as presented. Program experts and I are available to answer any further questions that you may have. Thank you.
Any questions? Any cards?
No, ma'am.
Okay, this hearing is concluded. The board will now consider preliminary adoption of amendments to the rules at 327 IAC 2-1.5-17 regarding Angola chloride variance revisions. Is there any board discussion? Is there a motion to adopt the rules as presented?
Ken Ruland, so moved.
Second? Is there a second?
Alexander, second.
This is a roll call vote. Dr. Alexandrovich,
Yes.
Mr. Bortner,
Yes.
Mr. Chambers,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mr. Green,
Yes.
Ms. Karosky,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Dr. Nemec,
Yes.
Rulon,
Yes.
Mr. Schuler,
Yes.
Mr. Woski.
Yes.
The chair votes aye. Again, the vote is 12 ayes, 0 nays. The motion is passed. This is a non-rule policy document presentation. We'll have that presentation by Michael Havoc of IDEM's Office of Land Quality regarding risk-based closure guide.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Havoc. I work in the Office of Land Quality, where one of my responsibilities has been coordinating a team of subject matter experts who are tasked with producing the attachment to this non-rule policy document. It is substantially reorganized from the previous attachment in 2012, which is itself a revision of the 2001 attachment. It's really the second revision of the original document. It's substantially reorganized, but its purpose is much the same, which is to provide guidance on the implementation of items, statutes, or Indiana statutes related to risk-based closure. In particular, how to characterize chemical releases, how to evaluate risks arising from those releases, and where necessary, how to remedies to address those risks and bring them down to the sub-level. So in addition to reorganizing the document, we also modified it by adding, removing, and revising material. We did that based on new science, EPA guidance, our experience working with the previous document in the last 2 years, and input from interested parties. As an example of that, we invited members of the consulting community, the environmental law community to comment on a preliminary draft. That activity resulted in about 300 comments, which we responded to in writing, and which we then used to revise the preliminary draft into a form that would then put on public notice. And then when the document on public notice, we got another 50 something comments. And we responded by revising the document further in response to both of those. And so that final revision, I think it's final revision, is what's been made available to you all. And that's how we got here.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much. The next item of business is the citizens petition, which has gone on for a pretty long time, couple of years at least. Paul Higginbotham will provide an update on the discussions between the parties. Paul?
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Paul Higginbotham, I'm Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the Office of Water and Quality. We're here to give an update on the petitioners, what we've been doing with them meeting as it relates to their 2012 rec criteria petition. I think as I mentioned the last board meeting, we have had some discussions with them concerning the actual 2012 criteria and their approach to that. And we basically now have also kind of put the brakes on that for the moment to allow us to have some discussions as it relates to getting to what they want, what they are asking for, and the issue of certainty as it comes to their inventory certainty, when it comes to their long-term control plans, and seeing if there's a way that we could figure this approach out in our existing statutory process as it relates to whether limited use subcategory rulemaking that we have in statute now. And we've done it for Fort Wayne and we've done it for the city of Indianapolis. So we've had our last meeting, it's May 24th, I believe. We had a meeting with the petitioners. We're in the process now, scheduled the next meeting here, next couple of weeks with the petitioners to further discuss that approach of what we're calling a focused UA approach. Use sustainability analysis approaches, which is needed to do the rulemaking for whether we use subcategory. And we're trying to figure out a way that we can streamline it in a manner that would be helpful for the smaller communities that may not have the resources, both money and expertise and staffing to do what, like the city, our citizens in Indianapolis have done, what the city of Fort Wayne have done, but can still get to the main elements of the use sustainability analysis with rulemaking that ultimately goes as a water quality standard change to EPA for their review and approval. So we're working through that process. It does take some time from the standpoint of, the folks, the petitioners themselves have a lot of activities that they're working on outside this issue, as well as staff, as the commissioner and chief staff have mentioned. We're pretty lean as it comes to resources and we're doing special projects. So we're trying to fit it in as we go. And I think we're making progress. What was submitted to us for discussion purposes from the petitioners at the last meeting was, enlightening and helpful. I think we just had some more questions for them concerning some of those submittals and how they came up with some of that certain data that they came up with. So that's what the next meeting will be about. There's a little bit further discussion and delving into those details. And there's a couple of petitioners here, they've gotten that right, but as you can see, we're getting along still, so I've been back there sitting with the individuals as well. They're not choking me, so.
I just wonder if they, you guys are working on this. I mean, I don't know that the citizens petition and, the idea behind that, at least as I understand it, is to actually get us to encourage a rulemaking. It seems like that petitions allows you to get with them and you're working out a solution to their problems without us having to tell you to do a rulemaking. Is that fair?
Yes, I would think it would. I can't speak for petitioners, but from my standpoint, the hope would be that yes, we're able to get to a resolution to address the petitioners' concerns and issues without having to make a rulemaking. We can just utilize our existing statutory rulemaking for the whether we use subcategory rulemaking. Is what I use, perfect world, that's what we're looking for.
That was kind of my question, because I didn't quite follow if you were looking at rulemaking or looking at needing statutory change, or you're trying to work against all that.
Yeah, no, if we're able, this approach we're going down now as it relates to the use sustainability analysis and the rulemaking, that if we can come to an agreement with the petitioner who coming or can satisfy the petitioner's request, then nothing would be needed from the board because we currently have that now, that process. Other than if there's rulemaking, like with you guys, like you've seen Fort Wayne or this CWA authority citizens / Indianapolis, whether some kind of rulemaking, you would see that when it would come about. That would be just like we have done previously, the previous two rulemaking on this matter.
Well, I would hope if you were looking at some streamline for the smaller communities, that you can't exclude the larger communities from those streamlines.
Well, I think we wouldn't necessarily exclude them, but some of those communities are also under federal consent decrees. So the APA and Department of Justice are a lot more involved in those federal consent decrees. They have a lot to say about things. So they are also players. They may want something a little bit more robust for those communities, plus the impacts from those larger communities are bigger and because of the volumes and the locations and CSO alcohol. So in a situation like that, the bigger communities may have to do more.
So the petitioners are all from non-consent decree?
We have one that's a person that is from Mission Walk, which is under federal consent decree, is part of this, sitting in all our meetings as well, having those discussions.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is that original consent decree on the ERB SharePoint? It's rather aged and I'm rotating on, so I have not viewed that document. Is it available?
They're available. We can get that information to Carla to get to the folks, because they're like, I mean, there's 10 different communities in the state of Indiana consent decrees.
Okay.
Well, actually,
I'm talking about the petition.
oh, the petition. Yes, I'm sure we'll get you the petition. That will be.
Thank you.
Well, Paul, thank you for your persistence on this, because I think it's really important that we come to a workable resolution without having to go back and adopt those 2012 standards.
Thank you. We'll keep our fingers crossed and hopefully we can get something worked out. Thank you.
So Chairman Guard, I'm trying to determine then if we should direct item to keep working on this, but to close the citizens petition.
Yeah, I think that should be an order of business. I think let's wait. It would be up to the board, I think, to actually close the citizens petition rather than IDEM. And if I'm wrong, somebody tell me. But I think we ought to wait till the next meeting, since we just brought up this idea, and give other people a chance to think about it and see if that's what they want to do. But it seems to me to make sense. Mr. Etzler sent me an email, realizing he probably wouldn't be here, saying that they were making good progress and he wanted to continue to see the negotiations and the meetings continue, and he's been a big part of it too.
I guess I would just ask that we take a vote at the next meeting on either forcing a rulemaking or not, or at least have some way that- it's like it's hanging in limbo, and I don't think that's fair to the citizens or to IDEM.
I think you're right. I'd like to be able to move ahead and close the petition, but continue these discussions. We've had this on the agenda for a couple of years now, and I think that's probably time to do what you said.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments on this? Commissioner, what do you think?
I appreciate everyone's patience as we work through this, and I do think we're going down the right path with the petitioners and with my water folks on finding a solution that's workable for them. And I look forward to the next board meeting to hear what you guys want to do.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
My opinion, Alexander's opinion, is that we keep it open, keep everybody's feet to the fire. I'm a little disappointed it's taking this long. I understand it's a big issue, but I don't think we should drop it. Because that will change kind of the umbrella over the discussions mark me a cynic, but it could come from either side, and I prefer to leave it open until it's resolved.
Okay, well, it isn't my intention that in dropping it, that people stop working on the issue. It would be my intention they would continue to work on it, but and I do want to get Nancy's opinion, legal opinion on this, because this is something we really haven't faced before, to see what the implications are if we vote not to move forward with the rulemaking. But it seems to me that we could have another motion to continue these negotiations, and actually, if need be, we could, verify, our support for this committee moving forward. And it has to be officially established by, by the board, we can do that.
And before Nancy speaks, I can tell you, Dr. Alexandrovich, that we are committed to seeing this through, whether there's a rule or not a rule. We understand that some of these communities want some certainty, and it's right for us to help get to a place where we can provide that.
I understand. I wasn't trying to imply that. It's just my feeling, keeping it open is best, but I appreciate the work. It's not that I don't think Item's gonna work to resolve it.
Is Nancy?
This is Nancy. I'll speak to this a little bit since we're somewhat attenuated from when this was provided to you, which was a couple of years ago. And the citizens petition concept and statute is not one that we as a board deal with all that often. But I think that what we can certainly do at the next board meeting is basically have an open hearing, so that the petitioners, those who have been working with this, can speak to the board about not just sort of an update, here's where we are and here's the deal, but the reality of this situation is, and I think it gets down to the question of whether the adoption of the 2012 REC criteria actually addresses what the petitioners have wanted, which is an easier way to go through the process that was set up and put in statute to allow us to get to the point where we are with both Indianapolis as well as Fort Wayne and the rules that you've adopted, that move through them working through what they're going to do to reduce their CSO overflows to the extent possible with the means they have based on the financials with each of those places that have these. We have over 100 of them in the state. So, and that happened many years ago, like 25 years ago. I was here still then, so I remember it vaguely. But the reality is that things have changed. The technology has changed. So we're continuously chasing the fact that we adopt something that is out of date 10 minutes later, in this case, 25 years later. So these people who are sitting at the table trying to address what is their current issue based on what the existing law is with the existing processes, it doesn't fit nicely into a category. So if the 2012 was at the time that they wanted to get this before the board, the closest thing to coming up with a solution at that point in time, but now they've worked through to a different solution based on what we currently have on the books, and just working through that process. And to your point of earlier, how many communities will this assist? Is there another process that is within the system that we currently have that's been EPA approved, although they weren't too thrilled about it at the beginning, as I remember. But the reality is, the point is to get to as little of CSO impact to the waters of the state as possible. And everybody has a different issue, everybody has a different problem as it relates to that. So a one size fits all is absurd when you're talking about over 100 communities. So to my knowledge, and from what I've heard from the discussions that have been had, those kinds of negotiations and discussions about real world issues is what has brought them to this particular pool. So if
you know, if the folks who brought this to the fore feel that maybe the 2012 is not really ever going to be the way they're going to want to go, they should be able to say that to you guys, and then you can decide if, from a process standpoint, it makes sense to say, okay, we're voting not to move this petition forward and ask you to do that role. If they come up with another option that they want to discuss with you, then, you know, we can go that route. It's really sort of a matter of, is it necessary to close out the citizens petition? The statute doesn't necessarily speak to that. It just assumes you're gonna decide one way or the other. It doesn't give a time frame, it doesn't give any of that. So I think having that open discussion at the next board meeting might help you to decide what should we do with this? Should we leave it open for the reasons that you're talking about, Joanne, or can we just ask the IDEM staff doing this and the petitioners to come back periodically and talk to us about what's going on and decide what direction we take? So we're not really completely constrained in what we do, because it's one of those arcane statutes that I'm probably moving with a little stuff. So, right. So yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense to have that kind of discussion, and then you guys can decide what you really want to do. We can accommodate that.
Thank you, Nancy. And if it makes you feel any better, I was here 25 years ago too.
Well, I guess that makes me feel a little better. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions about this? Well, it will be on the agenda next time. If there are thoughts that you have in the meantime that you want to share with the board, you can get those to IDEM, and they will make sure that they're distributed to the board. Okay, the next item of business is an open forum. Is there anybody that wishes to address the board today?
Well, I do have one question, which I neglected to ask Mr. Habeck, but the question is, and perhaps the commissioner or someone else can answer, is there a red line version of the revised remediation closure guide available for review? Hello, I am Peggy Wilson, Assistant Commissioner of the Office of Land Quality. Excuse me. And no, we do not necessarily have a red line. That document already started in 2001. And we have one revision, which is 2012. And since then, it has been a living, breathing document. And so if you looked at what we would ordinarily call a red line, it wouldn't even appear to be that same document. It would look so different. Almost every word has changed. So to produce a red line really isn't practical. We can show you what the 2012 looked like. We can show you those. So that would help if we do that. Well, those are on 2012 still on the website. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the. Very good. Any other questions? Sorry, my apologies, have gotten better.
Okay, is there anybody else that wishes to question the staff of the board or make a comment to the board? Okay, we'll close the open forum. Then the next meeting of the Environmental Rules Board is tentatively set for September the 14th at 1:30 in Conference Room A, Government Center South. We'll let you all know if they'll be able to use Zoom as well as in person. I think this has worked pretty good today. At least I think it has from this end. If any other comments, questions from the board?
Chairman Guard, Ken Rulon, Joanne and I have been on the board since it was formed, which I think is 10 years ago. 12 years ago. I don't know, we're all getting
Yes,
old.
it was 2012.
And I just wanted to publicly thank her for, she always asks great questions, and today's questions were excellent. And not one of three IDM employees could answer your question, and not one of three had the rules, which is kind of embarrassing. We'll blame that on Bruce. Okay, but I just wanted to thank her for her service and you for yours as well. So thank you.
Well, Dr. Alexandrovich always asks good questions, and that's why I've always pushed for her to remain on the board. She's a real asset. Okay, if there's no other comment from any board members, is there a motion to adjourn?
Katie Nelson, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Well, there is some weather moving in, so if you have to travel, keep an eye on that. So we'll see you in September.